Hey, what is up guys? Alex here from technoclass.com, and this is a budget 20,000 peso or 400 US dollar gaming PC. And man, it can do a lot. It plays GTA 5 at a very comfortable 60-ish frames per second. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds at more than that. Overwatch? No problem. Rise of the Tomb Raider? Easy. Heck, it even runs The Witcher 3 well enough that you're probably wondering how you're going to afford all of these games when each game costs more than 10% of the actual cost of the system. Anyway, this is a budget PC that students and entry-level gamers would be extremely happy with. It's even quite upgradable, so that you can build it to become a killer machine with a flexible system that you can part out easily. And since it is a beginner system, I'm here to teach you how to build it piece by piece, because learning how to build a computer at an early stage will reward you much later on, especially since you know exactly what to do when you upgrade to new parts. So let's get started. Here are the parts you need to build this #console killer PC. Let's start with simple explanations to get you up to speed. The minimum amount of parts you need to build a gaming PC is 7. That's the processor, motherboard, memory, power supply, storage like SSDs or hard drives, the case, and the component that powers most of our gaming here is the graphics card. That's 7 parts. Keep in mind that the Windows 10 software, monitor, keyboard, and mouse is not included in this list because most consumers can find those parts separately or already have them from previous computers, and we're only concerned with the box that dictates the performance of our system. So let's talk about the processor. We're going to be using the venerable Intel Pentium G4560. This is an amazing processor that only costs about 3,150 pesos or 60 US dollars. It's so amazing that Intel is slowly phasing it out because it is cannibalizing their more expensive processors. Generally, you'll need to dig a little deeper to find this in stock now, or you have to buy it with a motherboard, which is a good thing anyway since we're building from scratch. An alternative here is a slightly more expensive G4600, which bumps the price up $20 but gives a little bit more performance. Next is the motherboard, and this may require a little bit more research than just buying one outright. You'll need to find a cheap H110-M board that is already updated to support 7th generation Kaby Lake processors. This Gigabyte H110M-H model I got from Lazada for 3,380 pesos or $65 was guaranteed to be updated by the seller, so I bought it. The good thing here is that stores like DynaQuest bundled the G4560 processor with an already updated motherboard, so that is an even easier route to take. The bonus is that you can probably find cheaper boards that go for as low as 2,500 pesos or $50 if you go this way. If you somehow get a board that isn't updated though, you'll need to find a friend with a Skylake processor who can help you update it. Bit more work, so make sure you're compatible out of the box. For RAM, we went with the budget Team Elite Plus 8GB stick of 2133 MHz DDR4 memory. This cost us the same as our motherboard, so 3,350 pesos or $65. Now, if you're on a stricter budget, you can buy one stick of 4GB for less than 2,000 pesos or 40 US dollars and buy another 4GB stick later on to total 8GB. For gaming though, 4GB is really pushing the minimums, and we'd be much more comfortable with 8GB of RAM for games like PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds and GTA 5. For power supply, we're getting a budget Corsair model called the VS450. Not the best or most reliable power supply out there, but it's cheap at around 1,800 pesos or $36. Keep in mind, don't buy anything cheaper than this like the ones bundled into cases, because you don't want your PC to blow up. Those are generally designed for non-gaming workloads, so don't even try. Alright, everything else is pretty straightforward after this. For storage, we went with a 128GB Western Digital Green SSD costing us 2,900 pesos or $55. We're busy people, and since we're doing a lot of installing on the system, we went with a fast SSD. If you have more patience than us, you can definitely go cheaper and get more storage with a SATA hard drive. It's all up to you. For the case, you can buy anything affordable like whatever Techware is offering under 1,000 pesos or $20. The one we used is a Sharkoon VG5-W that cost us 1,800 pesos or $36. We do not recommend this model because of quality issues, and you'll be much better served spending the extra money elsewhere. And finally, we have the graphics card, an Asus 1050 Expedition OC. This costs about 6,400 pesos or $125. And if you can find the cheaper non-OC variant, you should be able to save another 1,000 pesos or $20. OC means overclock, so you can dial that on your own and possibly save some extra money. Overall, though, this is a great card that's perfect for entry-level systems, and it's pretty nice looking too. So our total cost for this build comes up to just under 23,000 pesos or $460. But it's very easy to bring it down if you, for example, bought a cheaper case, storage, motherboard, RAM, or GPU. Some of our choices here were driven by the availability of some components at the time of purchase, so you can definitely build this to be much cheaper. We do, however, feel strongly about 8 GB of RAM, so only go 4 GB if you absolutely can't afford it. And that's pretty much all you need to build a very powerful but affordable gaming PC. You'll be able to play some of the best AAA titles out there, albeit generally in the lowest settings possible at 1080p. But what's great about this is that you can customize or upgrade this as you please. You can opt for a more powerful Kaby Lake processor, and it'll work without changing anything else on this build. Or you can buy a more powerful graphics card, and this configuration will work to possibly even up to a GTX 1060 or RX 580. Upgrade storage, power supply, etc. to your needs as well. Most components here aren't dependent on the other, so feel free to mix and match to your heart's content. This is a machine that you, as an entry-level system builder, can grow on and stay with for years to come. And believe me when I say I really do game on this system and use this as my secondary machine comfortably because of how fast the G4560 processor is and how good the Asus 1050 is for most of my entry-level gaming needs. So with that out of the way, it's time to build our $400 gaming PC. Reminder though, work in a non-static environment if possible. Touch your metal case occasionally to neutralize any static buildup. Alright, so let's get started with the CPU. Open the box, get a little transparent case out with the CPU inside, then open the main part of the box to get the air cooler. In this case, mine has old thermal paste, but if your CPU is brand new, it will have some unused thermal paste on the bottom of the cooler. In my case, I'll clean it with isopropyl alcohol and apply new thermal paste. Grab your motherboard and put it on something non-static like the bag it came with or the box. Then orient it with the CPU lever facing you. Just push that in and pull it to the side to free it, then open the lever. You'll see some grooves coinciding with grooves on your CPU, and gently drop that in there and it'll just fit in there with a little wiggle room on all sides. Close the lever down, making sure the metal teeth catch on the screw on the middle. Then slowly lower the lever until the cover pops off and push the lever back into its notch. In this next few clips, I'm going to clean the CPU and put new thermal paste on it. You don't have to do this if you're using a new CPU with pre-applied thermal paste on the cooler. Just don't touch the paste so it don't get dirty. Now with that done, the cooler goes on. You can put this in any orientation as long as the pegs are on the motherboard holes and the power cable conveniently goes to the CPU fan header on your motherboard. Push these pegs in and you'll hear a click. If not, try pushing the lower black circles first, then the button on top. The pegs have an arrow on them, but those are only used to remove the cooler. Once all pegs are clicked in, you're good to go. Next to the CPU cooler, you'll see these DDR4 RAM slots. Open the lever or levers on the sides and put your memory in following the off-center key, which will align with your memory stick. Press with your thumb on both sides until you hear it click into place. Next, let's work on our case. There will be screws on the back of it. Just unscrew these with a screwdriver or your hand if it allows it, and get to the inside by sliding off the sides. You'll see a bunch of cables for the case and some paperwork with extra screws in a pouch. We'll save the pouch for later. Open the backside the same way, then route the case cables into the nearest holes to pop out to the back. On your motherboard box, you'll see the I/O cover. Take it out and push it from the inside of your case. You'll hear it pop in on all sides. Rule of thumb here is that most covers will have circular audio jacks on the bottom, so put it in that way. Next, lace the case down and put your motherboard in. Make sure the motherboard ports are going into the holes of the I/O cover we just installed. This should be pretty easy since we have a small motherboard with lots of wiggle room. Screw the board in with screws from the pouch that came with the case. Use the thinner threaded circle-shaped screws. In this case, we'll use 4 screws and they'll coincide with standoffs that are built into most cases. Stand your case up and put your Corsair VS450 power supply on the bottom like most cases. The power supply has a fan on the bottom and our case has vents on the bottom too. Use screws that came with your case. These would be the thicker threaded with hexagonal head-shaped screws. The screws holes are pretty easy to spot and will align with the power supply easily, so don't screw into holes that don't make sense. With this power supply, thread all your cables into the cable hole closest to it so we can keep our system clean. From the back, we'll choose which power supply cables go into which holes to the front into the motherboard. Look for the 24-pin motherboard power cable, the 8-pin CPU power cable, and the PCIe 6+2 cable with 2 ends. Route the CPU power nearest to the upper far corner of your motherboard, the motherboard power near the closest side of your motherboard, and the PCIe a little farther down. We technically won't need a PCIe cable for our graphics card on this build, but we're routing it now, so if we upgrade later on, all we have to do is plug it into the new GPU. Plug the 24-pin power connector to the motherboard, 24-pin power. You'll see it has retaining clips, so align those with the groove for the clip on the plugs. Do this with the CPU power too. In this case, the 8-pin CPU power will be plugged into a 4-pin plug, and that is fine. At this point, let's work on the fan that's on the back of our case. Find the closest system fan header or chassis fan header and plug it in there. Since it sits close to our CPU cooler, we're going to add a cable tie to keep it from getting caught in the fan. Look through the cables that come out of the case. The blue block is for USB front header, so that goes near the front side hole. HD audio goes near the bottom rear. The power, reset, HDD light little cables go into the bottom front. Some other cables will be for the other fans and lights of this case, so we'll get to that later. Plug your USB cable header to the USB header on your motherboard. This only goes one way, so don't force it. Same with the audio header. Only goes one way. For power, reset, and HDD LED, it gets a little annoying, but just reading the label on the motherboard helps a lot. Plug the power switch on header labeled power, reset on the one labeled reset, and HDD light on the one labeled HD. Pretty simple. On your case, you'll have some hard drive and SSD mounting areas. Put your SSD or HDD in there and find the screw holes. Use the thinner thread circular screws, but don't over tighten. Grab a SATA cable from your motherboard box and take it out of its plastic. Plug one end on your motherboard, doesn't really matter which, and route it to the nearest hole. From the back of the system, plug the other end of the SATA cable to your hard drive or SSD. Now grab one of your power supply cables and look for the L-shaped plastic connector and plug that into the other plug that is on your hard drive or SSD. For the rest of these case fan connectors, just plug them onto the power supply cables you have left with the matching plugs. These are keyed so they won't go the wrong way in. Normally, it's time for cable management, but with this system, we'll just stash it in the cubby area on the bottom front of the case. Your system is actually now almost complete. Let's see if it will boot up. Plug the power cable to the power supply and switch it on. Obviously, plug it onto the wall as well. Then press the power button in front. Light should come up and fan should start spinning. Congrats, you're almost done. Free up some slots on your case expansion ports in the case in preparation for the Asus 1050 graphics card. Open the lock on the PCIe slot on your motherboard and slowly lower your graphics card onto the slot, making sure the contacts go into the slot. Push the GPU in until the lock clicks back into place. Take 2 bigger thread hexagonal case screws and screw your graphics card into place around the back. Now, plug your system to a monitor via its graphics card using any of the video ports like the most common HDMI one and turn it on to see if the video comes on. That's the last of our checks before we put the side covers back on and install Windows. After that, we turn the system on again with a keyboard, mouse, and bootable Windows installer USB plugged in. Go into BIOS generally by pressing Delete or F9 during the boot sequence. Set the boot priority to include the USB drive. Save your options and reboot into the Windows USB installer. After that, well, you just install Windows, install your drivers and games. Congrats! Your 20,000 peso or $400 gaming PC is complete. Finally, before we end the video and you go off running to buy these components, let me show you a little of what the system can do. On GTA 5, you can expect most scenes to run over 70 FPS. In fact, on the benchmark, you'll only see a dip below 60 FPS near the end when the car crashes into the gas tanker in the middle of the city. Great frame rates on this open world game's lowest setting. And it still looks pretty good. On PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, we're getting a very comfortable 70-ish FPS most of the time on lowest settings with a slightly higher draw distance. This makes the Asus Expedition 1050 OC such an amazing buy for the price it asks for while letting you play one of the most popular demanding titles today in very comfortable frame rates. Of course, you'll see bigger frame rate dips as the game is still very unpolished, but for 99% of your experience, you'll be over 60 Hz, and that's perfectly competitive in our books. On Overwatch, a very pretty title even in its lowest settings, 1080p, you'll be getting over 100 FPS in most scenes. This would even look great on a high refresh rate monitor around the 120 Hz area, giving you an amazing tactical advantage if you do buy a faster monitor. Those probably cost close to the rig's total price though, so that's probably not in your budget tier. Still, there's enough FPS in this rig to be competitive in this game. On Rise of the Tomb Raider lowest settings 1080p, you might see some dips in frame rate when some objects are loading, but for the most part you'll be staying above 70 FPS in this game. This is one of the more demanding titles out there, but thankfully it scales pretty well on the Asus 1050. And since the single player game is less competitive than Overwatch, you'll be quite fine targeting 60 FPS. Subtract about 15 plus FPS from Lara Croft's game and you can imagine what you'll be getting from The Witcher 3. Geralt's adventure still looks spectacular at the lowest setting here, and you'll be quite hard-pressed to find a deeper, better bang-for-buck single-player campaign than this game. Finally, for benchmarkers who are curious about the system's potential, you can see that on 3D Mark Firestrike, the system scores a respectable number just below 6,000 points. That's the power of NVIDIA's new Pascal architecture, helped a little by Asus's customizations to this graphics card. And that about ends our guide to building our very own 20,000 peso or $400 gaming PC. We've really come a long way as our budget rig has enough juice to play competitive games without really being at a disadvantage versus more expensive desktops. That's the beauty of modern architectures like the hyper-threading built into the G4560 processor or the higher performing, energy efficient NVIDIA Pascal architecture. Of course, games aren't running at ultra settings here, but it's easy enough to upgrade your GPU or CPU later on without really changing much in our system. That makes this a perfect springboard for the budding PC master race gamer out there who's looking to grow into the hobby. We all have to start somewhere, and this rig is a great place to do it with. I'm Alex from thetechnoclass.com. Thanks for watching. And thanks to Asus for lending us the GTX 1050 OC. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.